Welcome to the Baunfire. I am your host, Morgan, and this is a podcast about video game news, reviews, speculation, and rumors. This week, I'll be covering Alan Wake 2's reception, Xbox leadership shakeups, my plans for N7 Day 2023, and much more. A few things before we get started. On YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, consider becoming a member, hit the like button, and comment down below. Please subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform and leave a review on Spotify or iTunes to help other people find the show. A special thank you to all my patrons and YouTube members, including producer level folks, Hassan and YouTube's, supporter level patrons, PK, The Dawn, Cage Nephilim, and Neuronix, as well as viewer level friend of the channel, Zenra. If you're interested in supporting this podcast for as little as $1 per month, please check out patreon.com/bonddiesel or the member tab on YouTube. Gaming news. Let's get into it. Alan Wake 2 has released. I believe 13 years after the original game came out, made by a different developer studio, we now have Alan Wake 2, made by Remedy, known for Control, as well as of course I'm gonna forget, Max Payne games, and it's coming out to a pretty good reception. It has a Metacritic score of 88. What's really interesting about Metacritic scores recently, or at least in my opinion, has been that you could see a game in the mid, low, and even high 80s that got a ton of 9s and 10s out of 10s. Now the 9s make sense. If you have a game that gets a bunch of 9 out of 10 reviews and then even just a few 8s or 7s, it's going to drag it down a bit. But I feel like the Metacritic score doesn't really give a good impression of the impressions that this game is bringing forth. Almost universally from I try to follow a half dozen to a dozen various reviewers and journalists and podcasts and stuff like that that tend to have slightly different takes on things to try to get a more worldly view or whatever of these kind of games. And this one is being received really well, to the point where I'm surprised its Metacritic score isn't up in the 9s, at least, but that's okay. It's still doing really good. It seems like from a graphical point of view, even on consoles, it's very impressive. And it's, with this game, and we've had a few games in a row now who are starting, like Spider-Man 2 and in this game, as well as a few others this year, where people are finally starting to be like, okay, like, these games are starting to make this generation of consoles like, oh, they couldn't have done this before. This is a new thing. This is exciting. And this seems to, so far from what I've heard people say, that Alan Wake 2 is like really like almost putting itself ahead above everyone else, and just how beautiful and gorgeous this game is. The lighting, the various effects in the game, the character models, just everything is just extremely impressive. Now, it's also worth mentioning that this game mixes in a lot of FMV, or full motion video, so actual video of real people, and so, but that doesn't really skew this, because when people are talking about the graphics, they're obviously talking about the game and the gameplay. So it sounds like the story is amazing. It sounds like the environments and all of the art and everything, the models and the animations and all of that are top tier. The biggest thing I've seen people waver on is gameplay. It basically sounds like it's definitely an evolved, but very much like the original game. And so if you don't, and I've heard it's extremely hard as well. So if you didn't like kind of the way things were before, this game still has some of that, but it is much more of a modern kind of survival game in a lot of ways. And but even the slight wavering I've heard people have about the gameplay, it still sounds like it's a great game to play. So it's like being nitpicky for the sake of, if you only say good things, people won't believe you, right? I have this game. It's downloaded. It's ready to play. I'm probably gonna play it tonight after I record this and after the little one goes to bed and such. But I'm really excited. This is not really my genre, not my type of game, but it seems like this game is just so stunning in that the story is really cool with the two different characters, and with one being Alan Wake and the other being this FBI detective who's, how they kind of how that all works. I'm excited to get a chance to check this out. So seems like it's being pretty universally loved, and I can't wait to hopefully love it too. And I will speak probably next week or the week after with some type of a review. And if you check out my Twitter, it's at Bon Diesel. You can catch. I've been reviewing games on there on a 1 to 10 scale that's based on recommendation. It's not necessarily based on graphics and gameplay and this and that. I have a scale that's 1 to 10, and it's how seriously I recommend a game to other people. And I always quote tweet my scale where I explain kind of my scale and how it works. So check that out. I've reviewed a bunch of games already, and I'm excited to keep doing that. And I may even try to bring that over to a video format at some point. I'm just not as eloquent as a lot of the people who I think do good reviews on games. You will not be getting a skill up quality review out of me. I simply don't have that patience or that writing or recording ability. But I would maybe like to bring this into kind of that fold. So we'll see. But Alan Wake 2 seems like it's being received extremely well. Has probably landed itself on that Game of the Year list as potential ones. And I look forward to, and I dread those Game of the Year discussions on the podcast and stuff this year, because it's just, I really don't think Tears of the Kingdom and even Baldur's Gate at this point are completely head above everyone else anymore. I think there's been too many good games. I think when it comes to the voting for like the Game Awards and stuff, I think we're going to see that all it's going to take is a few people to put a few outlier games into their top 2 or 3 or even their number 1, and it's really gonna skew and mess this up, man. It's I'm both excited and like I said, terrified. I think this year you'll notice, even if you look at all of the big publications, the Game Awards, IGN, GameSpot, all of the notable places, I think this is going to be the most diverse year of Game of the Year awards ever. Where last year it was all Ragnarok and Elden Ring, I genuinely think this year it's probably going to be a lot of Tears of the Kingdom and a lot of Baldur's Gate 3, but I think you're going to see other games sneak in there that will be kind of surprising, and it's going to be because of people just, there just being so many good games. And my last point before we move on, especially in formats where you have like publications or podcast groups where they like vote, there's a decent number of people on these panels or in these groups who weren't able to play everything. So like, I know, for example, like Tim Geddes at Kind of Funny didn't play Baldur's Gate 3 or Starfield. Not because he couldn't, he just didn't want to, which is fine. People should play what they want, even if you're in that role. But there may be people who just didn't get to Tears this year, who didn't get to, one of these games that, and I think this point is the last thing I'll talk about. What's wild is that there's at least 5 and probably more games this year that if they were by themselves in almost any other year would be like a hands down Game of the Year. There's games that might get left off the top 5 or 6 or 10 list that may be Game of the Years in other years. But they got unlucky, and we got very fortunate that they came out all this year. So cool. Games are awesome. Next story is actually, so I'm going to start doing this as just to interrupt the show just for a moment. I'm going to do a headline story every week with this podcast. And then I'm going to just kind of hit up some quick stories about Xbox, PlayStation, and Nintendo, and then move into any other kind of side stories or other things I wanted to talk about. So leading it off this week is Xbox news. They had a partner showcase this week. It was around 30 minutes where it was all partnered studios, none of their first party. It was showing off a bunch of that. So it was pretty good. I would say like half of it was great, half of it was fine. There were a couple weird games that I wouldn't have probably typically been very interested in. They had the Yakuza game at the beginning that just looks like it's. Of course, I'm not going to remember it. Animal Kingdom or whatever it's like a city builder game. Where you manage your community and do all kinds of stuff. It's not what I expected from that series, but there it is. We had a super cool first look at footage from the Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater remake that Konami's doing, and it looked sublime. It looked so good. I've seen some people kind of moan and groan about the style of it. I thought it looked amazing. It's another Unreal Engine 5 game. We're really gonna start. I think this is the beginning of the deluge of those Metal Gear Solid Metal Gear Solid of those Unreal Engine 5 games. I think we're really gonna start seeing that waterfall of, that engine's been out long enough, and those games have been in development long enough. Now we're gonna start seeing a bunch of those in the next couple years, which is exciting to me. That Snake Eater remake looked so good. I think it was Snake Eater Delta is the actual, or Metal Gear Solid Delta is the actual name. So very cool, looked great. And then the last Alan Wake 2 trailer, which obviously looked really good, just like everything else did. There was some weird like oil rig walking simulator game they showed that was the only trailer where I completely kind of like, raised my nose at it and was like, this is terrible, because it wasn't great. But that's fine. The reactions on this were mixed. Some of the one group I watched like co-stream it was like hyper negative and being real weird about it, but they were the same people who were preaching a few days ago like, oh, we know what this is, don't get your expectations too high. They've literally told us exactly what it is, and it ended up being exactly what they said it would be. But I would say the Metal Gear Solid edition and the footage really put it over the top of what I even expected. And so I do expect some kind of Xbox showcase in the beginning of the year, especially as kind of a little bit of a celebration of their Activision acquisition. And then obviously in the summer, probably in June, we'll have some type of showcase in the E3 timeframe, since it seems like E3 is probably not coming back. So I thought this partner showcase was great. I thought it was good timing, but I do hope at the beginning of the year we get some kind of big first party showcase where we see things like Senua's Saga and things like that. So cool, good showcase, or good partner showcase. And then there was a big leadership shakeup over at Xbox this week. This is likely them kind of preparing to take on the responsibilities of running and managing Activision, even though it wasn't really ever mentioned directly during in all of the announcements here. But long story short, Phil Spencer is staying where he's at as the CEO of the company, but Sarah Bond is being moved up to Xbox president, where she'll be overseeing basically the whole platform, from software to hardware and everything like that. And then Matt Booty will be become the president of game content and studios. And the big change up here is that the Bethesda will come under his management. As we learned about with Redfall this year, and even Starfield to a point, up to this point, Xbox had basically acquired Bethesda, ZeniMax, and then kind of just continued to let them do their own thing. And after especially the release of Redfall and how that game, that they kind of let them keep making it but never took it too seriously and didn't really get into it and try to manage that or give it more money or more attention, it came out in the worst possible timing for Xbox, and it was pretty bad. Now I think Xbox has really rebounded over the rest of the year, but especially the talking heads that are here for drama and all of that stuff are going to remember Redfall more than they're going to remember Starfield or Hi-Fi Rush or some of the good things this year. So Bethesda coming under probably a little bit more management is probably going to be a good thing in the long run. And I'm curious to see how that's going to affect things in the long run. Those kind of, you don't see the impact of those kind of changes for 3 or 4 years at least. So don't expect immediate changes how those things go. And then for Sarah Bond becoming Xbox president, that's great. She's seems like a really good leader. I've always really appreciated obviously her like scripted things that she does where she is presenting things for Xbox are great, but it's especially interviews and stuff I've read and seen of her where she's just a really impressive person. And I think seems like a pretty good person to take that role right now. And I agree with a lot of assessment I've seen from other people that Sarah Bond will probably take Phil Spencer's job as CEO one day. It's Phil Spencer isn't old, he's also not young, and he's been in the industry for a really, really long time. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if I think we'll see Phil through the rest of this gen and probably into the next gen of Xbox console and PlayStation. But I would be surprised if he goes much past that. That guy has probably got more money than any of us can even imagine, and I'm sure at some point he would love to retire and take advantage of the fruits of his labor, as they say. Moving over to some PlayStation news, we have Media Molecule and their visual arts team have layoffs. This is another in a series of layoffs from PlayStation first party studios and owned studios. It's not really a dog on them. It's not a negative on them. It wouldn't surprise me if next week we find out that Microsoft is having layoffs, and then the week after that, maybe Nintendo. I don't think Nintendo like publicizes anything they do business wise though, so maybe not. But this is obviously a bummer, and I think for gamers and community members and people who are kind of like really paying attention to this stuff, it's like weird because you see that Sony and PlayStation is having like an insanely successful generation. They're selling consoles, like crazy. They're selling games like crazy. Their first parties are doing great. Third party games are doing really well on their platform. They have the biggest install base of the current gen consoles. I don't know how much they're up over Xbox. No, neither of them released numbers that are really good, but from what I've seen, it's kind of predicted that they probably have sold, it's probably 60 to 70% of the new consoles, with Xbox doing well for itself, but not really putting it to Sony in any big way. So it's like weird optics from the outside to be like, how are they making all this money and laying people off? But just the way these businesses work and stuff, man, like it doesn't matter if 4/5 of the company are doing great. If your division isn't doing well, then that unfortunately can lead to moves. And that's not me defending that. I think that's awful. But it's I think people really need to start being a little more educated, or not even educated because I don't know what I'm talking about, but just a little more just knowledgeable about that. Like these big corporations aren't one big company as much as we want them to be. PlayStation is not just one company, especially their studios. And a lot of times these big corporations, the way it works is they have all these subsidiary studios that are run as their own little companies. And if they aren't individually performing well, no matter how good the mothership is doing, it can lead to stuff like this, and it sucks. I hope all those people find jobs very quickly. I'm sure they will, and maybe we'll see them rebound with other studios and do some really great work. I hope so. It also was revealed this week that the Slim, the new, I hate calling it a Slim because that PlayStation 5, the new model of it isn't. It's like an inch shorter and a little bit skinnier. It's more of just a new design for the console. Likely much cheaper to make than the OG version of it, which itself went through multiple revisions. And in a weird kind of turn, one of the big things about the new PlayStation 5 is that there's a base digital version, and then you can buy either a bundle that includes a disc drive, or you can buy a regular one without a disc drive and then later on buy a disc drive and install it. The problem is that apparently you have to connect to the internet at least one time with that to be able to kind of pair up the disc drive to the console. And they just it's a weird thing. I'm sure there's some really good explanation for it, some authentication of the hardware to make sure it's like a real disk drive, that people aren't going to use it as a way to steal encrypted data or to do, I'm sure there's a good reason for it, but it's just a weird look. This probably won't be that big of a deal for most people. Most people are either just going to buy the digital and never have a disk drive, or they're going to buy the bundle that includes the disk drive. And I believe that one is already paired up, so you won't have to worry about it. But it is one of those things that when people talk about game preservation and things like that, that say, 20 years from now, someone pulls out their old dusty PS5 and has, the new inbox DVD drive they bought and never messed with back then. They pop it in there because they want to play some PlayStation 5 game that's completely on the disc and doesn't need an internet connection. I don't know if that's a reality much anymore, but they do it and it doesn't work because they needed it to authenticate online, and maybe those servers are down, maybe they don't have an internet connection, I don't know. That's the issue people have with it. I suspect it won't end up being that big of a deal, and people will just buy the PlayStation 6 and never think about it again. So we'll see. The last one is Connie Booth leaves Sony and PlayStation after 30 years. And as far as I know, she's not been immediately replaced. Definitely a pretty veteran person on that team. Anyone who's been with PlayStation for that long, no matter what their role was, has been there during such an insanely impressive run from any company, but especially a platform in such a popular media like gaming, especially in the last 15, 20 years. Just awesome. I've seen people trying to portray this as a bad thing or a good thing. She's moving on, man. Like, people working somewhere for 30 years is a big deal. I worked at my current place of employment for 11 years, and thinking of, tripling that, or doing 2 times that, still is wild, even though I probably will, because I'm never going to retire. But, good on her. I hope she enjoys her retirement or her new position, whatever she ends up doing. And then I'm sure that opens up a great leadership position for someone who's been, working on it and earning it for a long time. And some Nintendo news. The only thing I really found this week was that Super Mario Brothers Wonder is the fastest selling Mario game in Europe ever. The in Europe qualifier, I think, doesn't really matter. I think, trends generally in gaming, at least in Western countries, can probably be kind of attributed to everyone. And so even though the only reason this says in Europe is because in some places in Europe are the only places where you get somewhat transparent revelations of sales and things like that. And so I wouldn't be surprised at all if this is the case everywhere. And from the reviews and stuff I've seen of this game, the gameplay I've seen of it in the last week or so, it makes sense. It's beautiful. It's every time these Nintendo games come out that just look so fun and so exciting, and like I would really love to play with my daughter and stuff. It's like I'm tempted every time to just buy a stupid Switch. But knowing that the next console is probably less than a year away, I just can't do it. And I especially can't, like, on principle, hate the idea of the Switch simply because I don't like that it's hardware that was outdated the moment it came out, and now it's 8 years later. Like, Nintendo has too much money to not be pushing the technology edge even just a little bit. I understand that they don't necessarily want to compete with Xbox and PlayStation in that like horsepower race, but that doesn't mean that they can't. I still feel like that's very much we're not trying to compete with them, and we're also trying to save a bunch of money because we know you fools will buy 150 million of these anyways. So, but the reason that happens is because their first party games are different. They're built different, as the kids say. I think they probably haven't said that in 5 years. I'm old. The Last of Us 2, moving on to regular gaming news, has remaster rumors. I feel like this has been a thing going around for a while, and it was something I love to poke fun at. It's kind of what I just said about Nintendo, though. Sony is almost certainly making a PS5 version of The Last of Us 2, or like a PS5 only version. And it's gonna come out and everyone's gonna pan it and be like, oh, this was unnecessary, that game only came out a couple years ago and it looks great already, and then it's gonna sell 20 million copies. Like it's like the Nintendo thing. Like, sure, even Sony fans can dog on decisions that Sony makes. That stupid Wi-Fi streaming thing that they're about to sell for on PlayStation, I bet it sells like hotcakes. I bet they sell out of it. So because even like I've seen even like PlayStation fans like dogging on that, like, oh, it doesn't have, you can't play games directly off of it, it's only streaming, you can only use it in your house, which probably isn't true. Like, yeah, everyone's dogging on it, including Sony fans, and that thing will probably sell like hotcakes and do extremely well. So it's kind of the same thing with The Last of Us 2. Does it need a remaster? Of course it doesn't. Should Sony maybe just be consumer friendly, and instead of doing a remaster or an upgrade, which is what it's really going to be, maybe that could just, I don't know, be a free patch with the game to thank their players for buying millions of copies of this game in their consoles? Well, they could. But if they could sell it for $50 instead, they will, or 70, hell, I don't know. So I don't see the point of getting upset about this. If you think it's dumb, then don't buy it. But I can almost guarantee you enough people are going to buy it that they're going to do it again. And what I bet they're actually going to do is later this generation, I bet they do a bundle version where the part 1 and part 2 are sold together, and maybe it'll come out the same time as 3, which they're almost certainly making or will make in the near future. So is what it is. I really don't see any point about getting upset about it. It's all good. Ubisoft delays Skull and Bones again. Oh my God. If you're on the audio version of this podcast, my face is very surprised. I cannot believe Skull and Bones has been delayed once again. That's sarcasm in case it's not coming through. It's been moved out of the current fiscal year, which for Ubisoft ends in March, I believe, at the end of March. And that means that it's maybe coming out sometime next year. Like I saw on a podcast, another podcast, they said, what makes me mad about this delay is I know in about a year I'm going to be talking about it being delayed again. It's just, what's weird about Skull and Bones is that it's a game that keeps getting delayed, but no one is excited for, at least no one I follow. And so it's this thing where it's, I think the average gamer is probably just like, just put it out. Just get it out of your hair. No one cares how good it is. No one's going to care about that game 2 days after it comes out. So just get it out and let these teams, for the love of God, move on to something else. Please stop torturing your devs. They do not want to keep working on this game. That, like, surely they see the writing on the wall here. Like, there's no way that the developers and the people in that studio and at Ubisoft think that, okay, if we just add one more thing, maybe this game is gonna be a banger. Like, there's no way anyone's that delusional. Now, maybe it comes out and it finds some success. Maybe it finds a niche. Maybe, there is a small but big enough group of people it finds and it ends up being great. And I genuinely hope for that. I hate the idea of developers' time being wasted and their careers being wasted, because like this game's been in development for what, like 6 or 7 plus years now. And there's probably devs who have only ever worked on this game. And so, like, I don't want their time to be wasted. I don't want their, resume to look bad because this is the only game they've ever worked on. And I hope that it comes out and it's great and everyone loves it. But people have played this game and they've done multiple tests, and the general reception is like, okay, like, how has this game gotten this much attention and been delayed so many times and gotten, all of this, hubbub, when it's just like not great? When so many people have just been like, just take Black Flag and make it like a side game, like a spinoff. But who knows? Probably the more interesting part of this story. This came from a investor meeting, one of their stock announcements they did, that they also delayed a major release out of this fiscal year as well. A lot of people have been saying it's Star Wars Outlaws, the Ubisoft massive Star Wars game that I think looks incredible and looks really exciting. I don't think that's the case. I don't think that game was probably slated for until next summer or later. So my guess is that The Division Heartland was probably slated to come out in early 2023 or 2024, and they've decided to like internally delay it, which this is referencing. That game, I've talked about it before. Like I've had a lot of access to that game over the last so many years, so I don't want to talk much about it. What I will say is that purely based off of knowledge I know is public, I think it's weird that that game, it just keeps on getting pushed. And the further from the Division 2 that game gets, the worse timing I think it is for it. And I know there may be some idea of like, well, maybe Division 3 is coming soon. And maybe, it's part of that. I don't think, the Division 2 came out in 2019. So it's been 4.5 years or so. I would be amazed if the Division 3 comes out within the next 4 years. And so I just think this game, I don't know if Heartland is really going to be the game that like is really meant to like satiate players for 4 years. Maybe it is. I hope I'm wrong, because that'd be great. It's just another, Ubisoft is a weird studio right now. Like I really think that the Star Wars Outlaws game is going to be a standout game for Ubisoft. But so many of their games like just seem like no one's excited for them, or at least not the general gaming audience. Even like I'm excited about the Avatar game, and I still think it's really going to surprise people and end up being really good. But you definitely don't see that vibe from the average gamer or the average journalist or YouTuber and things like that. So I think a Division 3 is a game that will get a lot of people hyped and kind of get the general gaming audience excited about a game. But I don't know. We'll see. But I think that delayed game was probably Heartland. I don't think it was Outlaws, but we'll probably never find out. Those kind of things typically don't get confirmed publicly, but we can guess. There was an interesting thing I just noticed and I made news about this week, and even though no one really cared, I still want to talk about it. I will toot my own horn. Over on my Twitter, I posted an article and made a video about how Dragon Age Dreadwolf apparently has been getting worked on by EA Motive for almost the last year. So basically what happened is I posted about something with BioWare, and I think over on Threads, someone replied to me kind of seeming like they knew, I assume someone who's pretty deep into the Dragon Age community. And so I looked at their page and saw that they mentioned that they saw that someone on LinkedIn had put from EA Motive, who's the Dead Space remake and now the Iron Man developer, in their LinkedIn that they had worked on Dragon Age Dreadwolf. I did some sleuthing and found that there's never been any mention by EA or BioWare or EA Motive that they were helping with Dragon Age Dreadwolf. That's the big BioWare franchise that the game was tentatively expected this year, is now expected to be delayed and not come out until next year. And we know that there are some studios helping them with it, but like BioWare's Mass Effect team has lent some people to it. Mark Dara, a former BioWare employee, has come back to consult on finishing that game up. But we, as far as I can tell, have never gotten any big media attention that EA Motive was working on that. Now, it kind of made sense as the Dead Space remake development probably slowed down in late 2022 before it released in early 2023. They probably had room for some of their developers to go over there and help out. They also only just in the last week or two announced that they're going to be working on an Iron Man game in the Unreal 5 engine, Unreal Engine 5. And that does, they released Dead Space, and then there was no DLC or anything. They did do some fixing up of some bugs and issues with it, but that did leave a window there, and it seems like at least a decent number of developers at EA Motive since about November of 2022 until about August of 2023 helped out over on Dragon Age Dreadwolf. The one specific person I saw was an environmental artist, and so it was probably someone working on or maybe polishing up some of the environments and some of the models and stuff like that. And BioWare is currently hiring for a video a VFX person to work on the game on an 8-month contract. So that would tell me that they're probably releasing that game within 8 months. This is probably someone who's going to work on cinematics or trailers or even just stuff within the game. When I talk to some developer type people about what that position could be, it sounds like, and much like most gaming positions, the title probably they're so vague that it's hard to really tell exactly what people are doing. And then a really nice commenter on my YouTube, when I made a video about this, put up a big comment. If you want to go back and look at my YouTube videos, if you find the video about this story about EA Motive working on Dreadwolf, there's a great comment in there where someone who I believe, or I assume, is a big Dragon Age community member, listed that this actually has been a story in that community. It just never really hit the mainstream, and that it seems like there's a pretty decent number of devs who have been working on Dreadwolf from EA Motive and likely other studios. Now, I believe EA Motive is actually made up of the remnants of an old BioWare studio, and so it's not that surprising that there would be some connection there still. And so Dreadwolf, I know everyone's so down on BioWare right now. It's completely understandable, but it's one of those things where, like, I want that next Mass Effect game to come out at all and to be good so bad that I'm rooting so hard for Dreadwolf, because I think if it comes out and it's even just like a 7.5 out of 10, that's fine. Like a 7.5 and 8 out of 10 would be just huge for BioWare. I think that, especially if it's like this is really good, it's a lot of fun, maybe they could have done this better or this better, but overall I love this game and I can't wait to see the next Mass Effect. Like, that's the kind of attention they need right now, because the only good vibes they've had in the last 15 years has been that Inquisition was received pretty well but maybe didn't age great, and that the Mass Effect Legendary Edition, a light remaster of the original trilogy, was received extremely well and sold pretty well as well, it sounds like. So I'm rooting for BioWare. I'm rooting for Dragon Age Dreadwolf. We will have to wait and see how that turns out, though. We found out this week that Digital Extremes, the indie developer and publisher behind Warframe, is getting a new CEO. This doesn't come as that big of a surprise, I guess, from what I read. The previous CEO has, helmed the studio and the indie publisher, I believe, for quite a while, and through all of their trials and tribulations. And Digital Extremes and Warframe is a studio and a game that, to me, it's like one of those things that no one thinks about. Like, no one realizes that Counter-Strike has a concurrent over 1 million player population, where really popular games are happy to have 50,000 people concurrent playing their game. And I feel like Warframe is very much in that kind of that kind of light, where you just don't realize how popular that game still is, because it's popular to a really big niche. Like the people who like Warframe mostly just play Warframe. It's kind of like Destiny people. You may not realize how popular Destiny still is, because they probably don't get a ton of new players. They're not pulling in, they aren't the most popular new player game, but they retain their player base extremely well, because a lot of the people who play these games as a service, looter shooter type games, that's the game they play. And obviously, I'm sure over the years that's dwindled a little bit as people have probably gotten tired and blah, blah, blah. But, good for Warframe, good for Digital Extremes. I'm glad it seems like they're still doing well. I believe they're making a high fantasy type of game. It's like Iron Frame or something. That's supposed to be a little bit different take than what they normally do, but I suspect that a big part of this new CEO situation is that the old one didn't want to go through a whole new franchise, and the new one is equipped to hopefully carry them through that process. So good for them, good for everyone there, and good for those fans. I'm happy that things are looking up for people over there. Okay, so let's talk about some of my own news. So I started a new podcast. It's called the Mass Effect Hypecast. There is one episode out now, so if you want to look it up, it's in the Linktree link down in the description of this podcast, either the video or the audio version, or you can just look it up. It's the Mass Effect Hypecast. I have it currently on all of the bigger platforms: Spotify, iTunes, I'm working to get it on as many platforms as I can. So please be on the lookout for that. The whole idea with that podcast is for like an outlet. When there is news about Mass Effect, I'll still talk about it here on this podcast, but I'll go into it in more depth on that podcast. Here, I definitely have found myself like finding reasons to talk about Mass Effect when there are none, and there's definitely not news happening. And so I suspect it always feels like a departure from the goal of this show. And so that's going to be my creative outlet for that. And there's definitely an opening in that community for like a podcast that's just about the next game, either discussing news, discussing speculation, and just throwing out fan theories and stuff like that. There's some really great podcasts that are currently being put out, like the Mass Effect Lorecast, that are very focused on the story and little tidbits and focusing on like specific characters and things like that. And they do things 100 times better than I ever can. So I would never, ever try to infringe on their whole deal. But something I am pretty good at and something I enjoy is being hyped and speculating and doing that, especially with the next Mass Effect game. So if you like Mass Effect, if you're even generally interested in the next game, I highly suggest you check out that podcast, and I'll be happy to hopefully see that grow as well as as long as people come and check it out. So please do that. I am going to do an N7 day giveaway. So November 7th is their big franchise celebration. Starting on the 31st of October, I will have a giveaway going where there's a bunch of merch and a free copy of Mass Effect on any platform you want. I will be providing that code for 3 winners in those merch prizes. So be on the lookout for that. Please spread that around. A big reason I'm doing this is to try to get some traffic into that Mass Effect Hypecast, to try to get some people in there talking and to kind of grow that community a bit as it's new, because that's definitely when it's easiest. And then my plans for N7 day in general, I'm actually taking that day and the next day off, a little bit to cover, anything that comes out that day. And then the next day to do all of the other videos, all the deep dives and such. But I'm also planning on doing a bunch of housework. So as much as I would love to take days off just for games, in my mid 30s, I think I've decided that's just not realistic anymore. And I don't want to get my butt kicked by my wife because I'm maybe a little beyond that part of my life, but that's okay. For listener questions, let's check that out. If you have your own questions or topics or things you want me to talk about in the next episode of the Baunfire, please submit them. You can submit them in my Google form questionnaire that I post on Twitter, and that's in my Discord. You can ask in a room that's just for that in my Discord. You can check out the YouTube comments and post things in there, and I'll talk about it from there. Or you can hit me up on Twitter at BonDiesel, where I am happy to answer questions. Either you can ask me publicly by just adding me, or you can DM me on there as well. This week, the only question I got in time for the show was from Azra Games, I believe over on Threads, and they said, "What is the best game?" So that is an impossible question to really answer, but it was so vague and open that I appreciate the challenge, and I can't give a straight answer. So if it's what is my favorite game, that's got to be the Mass Effect trilogy at this point, with like the Division right behind it. As well as a bunch of other more smaller single player experiences I've really enjoyed. But if it was the best game, that's even hard to answer, because if I think of it as what's the best game in general, if I don't count my own opinions, if I have to look and see what game has been the best for the most number of people, you can look historic and you can look at the Mario series and the various Mario games. You can look more modern, and as much as I know people would hate to hear it, Fortnite. I'm sorry, I'm not into Fortnite. It's not my game, but I respect it so much. And that game is such a big deal for so many of the people who love it. And what's so funny is you saw all of these companies trying to invent a metaverse and do all of this stuff and fail miserably, while Fortnite started off as this terrible single player game. They added a battle royale mode, and it's evolved from that to being the biggest thing in games and to being a metaverse almost unintentionally, that it because it naturally developed in that direction instead of being forced to start that way. Again, I'm not a big Fortnite fan, but if I had to say what is the best game, Fortnite, it's either Fortnite, Mario as a franchise, or Minecraft. Because I think Minecraft was Fortnite before Fortnite, right? Or Fortnite is the new Minecraft in that way of it attracts everyone. It's the biggest thing in the world from a lot of people, and it's probably not going away anytime soon. So thank you for that question. If anyone else has anything you would want to ask me or have me talk about next week, I am more than happy to oblige. Let's wrap this thing up. Thank you so much for listening. Please interact with the show if you desire to. Let me know if you have any feedback or thoughts. The big thing about these solo podcasts is that they don't have a lot of interactions. It's just me sitting here talking to you. And so where some podcasts have a cast of people who all are chatting and arguing and stuff like that, to make this interesting, I need to hear from you in the ways I've provided. So hit me up. I would love to have your feedback or your thoughts or your questions or just your comments, and we can get into that. You can find me all over the internet as Bon Diesel, including over on Twitch, where I do try to stream a few times a month and talk about these same topics live. And there you can yell at me directly if you think I'm wrong. To support my content, please check out patreon.com/BonDiesel. Join as a YouTube member. Subscribe over at Twitch, especially if you have a free Twitch Prime sub, or check out my merch at the Linktree link in the description below. That's all I have. So until next time.